While PC gaming might be an expensive hobby to get into, especially thanks to rising costs of graphics cards, there are definitely quite a few advantages to it. Aside from a PC itself being a worthwhile machine to keep around that's capable of multiple functions, when just taking the gaming side of things into account, it has the largest, widest library of any other gaming system out there. So we decided to sit down, take a look, and figure out the 60 best single-player games that you can play on a modern gaming PC today. Clair Obscur Expedition. While traditional role-playing games never disappeared, they did become quite rare for a few years. The release of Clair Obscur Expedition has managed to remind many people why that style of combat was so beloved. Along with an excellent setting that revolves around serious themes like loss and grief, Expedition also has a solid take on turn-based combat, with every single character in your party having their own bespoke mechanics, be it Maeve's stance system, how Lune handles elements, or even Gustav's overcharged mechanic. Pair this with rewarding high-level gameplay with parries and dodging, and you get one of the best RPGs out there. Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 finally managed to hit mainstream success, thanks in large part to its strong setting and ambitious design. Baldur's Gate 3 adapts rules from the 5th edition of tabletop RPG Dungeons & Dragons, and features some of the most interesting and likable characters that have been featured in games in quite some time. Along with this, it also has an expansive story that kicks things off with a great premise. Figure out how to get rid of a parasite in your brain before you end up being turned into a mind flayer. What follows is an epic adventure that carries you through different cities and planes where countless stories and challenges await. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Complete Edition. What can we say about The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt that hasn't been said already? An entire decade since its original release, the open-world RPG has continued to be awesome thanks to constant support from CD Projekt Red, not only through the release of 2 excellent expansions, but also through updating the title to make use of more modern hardware with enhanced visuals. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt continues to have an excellent story, with plenty of wonderfully written side quests. All of this, paired with a great combat system, leads to a generally fun way to spend hundreds of hours. Elden Ring plus Shadow of the Erdtree. In many ways, both Elden Ring, as well as its expansion, Shadow of the Erdtree, represent the culmination of everything From Software has learned in developing titles since 2009's Demon's Souls. Along with the slow-paced but heavy combat that the studio is known for, Elden Ring and its expansion also feature a great open world to explore, some of the best boss fights it's ever designed, and some incredibly dense lore available for players who would care enough to pore through the dozens of item descriptions and conversations needed to uncover it all. Pair this with tools that provide plenty of options for players that might want an easier time through the game, and Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree simply prove themselves to be the best that From Software has to offer. Red Dead Redemption 2. Developer Rockstar has had many great games under its belt, essentially changing the entire concept of open-world games with the release of Grand Theft Auto 3. But none of them have been as jaw-dropping or awe-inspiring as 2018's Red Dead Redemption 2. Acting as a prequel to the original Red Dead Redemption, the title puts you into the shoes of Arthur Morgan as he experiences the age of the cowboy coming to an end as a member of the Vanderlyn gang. Along with some excellent character writing and fun missions, Red Dead Redemption 2 also offers dense gameplay, taking on a simulationist approach to even side activities like hunting or train robbing, giving players hundreds of hours worth of things to do in its massive and lush open world. Days Gone Remastered. While Days Gone was originally a PS4 game that came to a middling reception, its release on PC has been a glow-up for the open-world zombie title, with modern gaming PCs being more than capable of handling the hordes of zombies that get thrown at you. Sure, the main narrative may not be particularly noteworthy, however the side activities, as well as the general gameplay loop encouraged by the fact that upgrading your motorbike is important, make the overall idea of setting out to scavenge from long-abandoned medical facilities or even rival gang camps an enticing idea. Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition. While its initial release may have been a bit of a mess, in the years since, Cyberpunk 2077 has proven itself to be an excellent open-world action RPG. Taking on the role of V in the year of 2077, you set out to become a legend in Night City. However, one of the jobs you take alongside your best friend Jackie goes horribly wrong, and now you're slowly dying and the ghost of Johnny Silverhand lives in your head. Cyberpunk 2077, along with its expansion Phantom Liberty, tells an excellent story that takes you across Night City's various districts and social strata as you try and figure out the evil machinations of the megacorporation Arasaka that led to the development of the thing that has been slowly killing you. Along with an excellent main story, Cyberpunk 2077 also features several well-written and fun side quests that can range from getting into a rivalry with a Japanese pop group to discussing the nature of sentience with an AI taxi service. Disco Elysium: The Final Cut. Quite easily, one of the most interesting takes on the RPG genre that's been attempted. Disco Elysium: The Final Cut puts you in the shoes of a detective. You explore the city of Revachol, which is seemingly in the midst of a cultural upheaval in some parts, alongside your partner, Lieutenant Kim Kitsuragi. Disco Elysium forces more on conversation than it does action, and one of its most unique aspects is the fact that each aspect of the protagonist's mind and body has a personality of its own. Through these conversations, you learn more about yourself, about Revachol, and about the world at large. Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Mass Effect is one of those rare video game trilogies that deserves its legendary moniker. The three titles tell the story of a galaxy's fight against a cosmic existential threat, and puts players in the shoes of human commander Shepard, who must assemble a ragtag crew of allies from the various species from across the galaxy as they try to figure out the mysteries behind the forces known only as the Reapers. Along the way, in true RPG fashion, there are also plenty of choices that players have to make, with many of these choices having far-reaching consequences for the galaxy as a whole. While the ending of Mass Effect 3 might be regrettable, the rest of the journey still holds up even today as one worth experiencing. Prey 2017. While it may not have anything to do with its 2006 namesake, Prey 2017 is an immersive sim that puts players in the shoes of Morgan Yu. Working for the Transtar Corporation on ethically dubious experiments, you eventually start serving on the Talos 1 space station. However, these experiments eventually start going wrong, and the space station comes under attack by an alien threat known as the Typhon. The twist is that these aliens can shapeshift, which adds an extra layer of tension to the gameplay. Even when you're just exploring an office room, one of the mugs may end up being a mimic-type Typhon that can attack you at any time, after all. What makes Prey especially interesting is the freedom it gives the player in how they choose to tackle any situation, be it stealth, combat, or even something more creative, like building platforms out of nearby furniture and your goo gun to avoid any dangers. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Special Edition. Skyrim is still, at the time of publishing, the latest game in the Elder Scrolls franchise, and there's a good reason that it's been the best-selling one so far. Taking place in the eponymous region of Skyrim, the game puts players in the shoes of whatever character they might like to be, and after a short opening quest, sets them free in the world. What makes Skyrim fun is that it has hundreds of hours worth of content, not only through its main story, but through several side quests as well. Along with this, the game also has an excellent modding community that has constantly worked on adding more content to the game, as well as improving what's already been there. Generally speaking, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is the closest thing we have to a game that we can play forever. Fallout 3. What Skyrim does for the fantasy genre, Fallout 3 does for players that might prefer a post-apocalyptic setting. Taking place in and around a post-nuclear Fallout Washington, D.C., referred to in-game as the Capital Wasteland, Fallout 3 sets you loose in an open world with a single goal: find your father. More interesting than the main story, however, is the sheer amount of side content that is available right from the get-go. The first-person RPG will have you cover the entire length and breadth of the Wastelands as you try and do as many side quests as possible thanks to the excellent writing. While we're at it, the gameplay isn't bad either. It might be dated by modern standards, but the RPG systems in the game allow for plenty of player choice in terms of how you want to define your playstyle. Hollow Knight Silksong. After years of memes making the rounds on the internet, Hollow Knight Silksong is finally out. Putting players in the shoes of new protagonist Hornet, Hollow Knight Silksong features an entirely new world to explore and tons of challenging boss fights to tackle. Along the way, there are also plenty of new gameplay systems to explore, including the new healing mechanics as well as the ability to change up Hornet's entire moveset if you so desire. Much like the original Hollow Knight, Silksong has an easy claim to the crown at the top of the genre. Marvel's Spider-Man 2. While Marvel's Spider-Man was already a fantastic return of the web-slinging to the gaming medium, Insomniac Games has taken everything about the open-world action game and turned it up to 11 with Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Not only does it feature an even more epic storyline featuring plenty of Spider-Man rogues gallery, it also features two whole Spider-Men taking on the threat to New York City, Peter Parker and Miles Morales. Throw on top a fun plot about both of our heroes growing together, as well as the unique personal issues affecting both of them, as well as the threat of the symbiote over the whole plot, and you get a great time. Little Nightmares 2. Little Nightmares 2 is an interesting game, since while it might appear like a cutesy platformer from the outside, underneath its adorable exterior lies a dark game filled with a surprising amount of horror. The title revolves around a boy, Mono, who finds a girl, 6, trapped in the basement of a dark and terrible house, and the two must work together to make it out alive. Along the way, they will have to deal with many terrifying enemies and other dark secrets of the main setting of the game, the Pale City. And the title makes heavy use of some psychedelic visuals to hammer home the point that the city is not a welcoming place for wayward children. Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2. While most open-world RPGs tend to make use of fantasy settings, Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2 instantly sets itself apart from its contemporaries by instead making use of a real-world place, complete with accurate depictions of historical events. Taking place in the lands of Bohemia, protagonist Henry finds himself and his friend Sir Hans the victims of a bandit attack on their way to deliver a message to Trotsky. What follows is Henry's attempt to complete his mission, and along the way, grow as a person. Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2 takes a simulationist approach to its gameplay, with armors and weapons feeling appropriately hard to find and maintain, and crafting systems that will have you reading instructions from books before you go about mixing potions or forging a sword. The title offers hundreds of hours worth of gameplay, along with some of the best sword fighting mechanics ever executed in a first-person game. Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake was a masterclass in horror, but its sequel takes things a step further. In Alan Wake 2, players control multiple characters as they explore genuinely creepy locations, face terrifying creatures, and experience it all with an amazing score and exceptional gameplay. This is what horror games should strive to be, and it leaves us eager to see what Remedy has in store for the inevitable Alan Wake 3. Death Stranding Director's Cut. Hideo Kojima's first major project after his departure from Konami, Death Stranding is a game that is quite difficult to explain. Essentially, you're a courier in a world where a global catastrophe has made humanity spread out far and wide, with little to keep them connected to each other. The core gameplay revolves around you taking on delivery jobs and then figuring out how to cross the terrain to get to your objectives. What makes this interesting is that Death Stranding is one of those rare games where terrain is quite important, and you can't just climb any surface you see. This means that you will have to figure out the best route to take that doesn't risk too much damage to the cargo you're carrying. Throw on top a bonkers plot that revolves around the concepts of death, the soul, and the body, as well as the general creepiness that the ghost-like BTs exhibit, and you have a fantastic time experience. While long, it's well worth it. The Witness. From the developer behind Braid, The Witness is a strange puzzle game that takes a single mechanic, being able to draw lines, and turns it into the entire game. While most of the title will have you finding screens to then solve logical puzzles with your line-drawing powers, the whole game essentially blows open at a certain point when you start to discover that the entire world around you is also a puzzle that can then be manipulated and solved in different ways. Along the way, the game also features narration that explores the nature of the island you're exploring, and what its true purpose might be. All of this is paired with some wonderful art direction and a vibrant color palette that makes sure that nothing in The Witness ever looks boring. Ghost of Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima is an open-world game where the protagonist, a samurai named Jin Sakai, survives an initial battle against an invading Mongol force and must rally the citizens and soldiers of Tsushima Island to mount a resistance against the invaders. Over the course of the fantastic open-world game, Sakai must also come to terms with meanings behind the words like honor and the caste system that Japan was living under at the time. Ghost of Tsushima features simple but excellent combat gameplay, as well as quite a few tools for the player should they decide to sneak around instead, as they go around Tsushima liberating settlements from the Mongols and ultimately figure out a way to get at the primary antagonist, Khotan Khan, cousin of Kublai Khan. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. While the original The Last of Us was a great game with a fantastic story anchored by wonderfully written characters, The Last of Us Part 2 goes a step further, giving us a darker tale that focuses on two distinct characters and their quest for vengeance and redemption. Along with the larger overall scale of gameplay, The Last of Us Part 2 also tells a grander story and features some of the most fun boss fights to have been put into a title where the gameplay is otherwise quite realistic. On top of all this, the remastered release on PC also has a host of extra content in the form of the roguelike survival mode No Return, where you get to take on combat challenges as the character of your choice in a variety of different levels. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. From Software might be largely known for its slow-paced action RPGs in the Souls series and Elden Ring, but with Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, the studio instead decided to take on a much faster style of gameplay, where being on the defensive was punished. Rather than hiding behind a shield, in Sekiro, you're instead focused to learn the timings of various enemy attacks so that you can instead parry them, eventually breaking your foe's posture to then finish them off with a glorious killing blow. The title still maintains much of the From Software DNA, however, including how death works and the emphasis on smaller scaled levels that are more dense and intertwining, encouraging plenty of exploration. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, despite its differences from the studio's other games, can easily be considered one of its best outings yet. Uncharted: Legacy of Thieves Collection. A collection featuring two games, Uncharted 4: A Thief's End and Uncharted Lost Legacy, Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection tells two excellent stories. While one tries to wrap up the ongoing plot of Nathan Drake trying to forge a legacy for himself, the other instead features two supporting characters from preceding Uncharted games in the roles of dual protagonists as they set off on an adventure of their own. Where Uncharted 4 offers a polished take on everything the series has had to offer so far, Lost Legacy instead goes for more experimental game design. All in all, both titles are well worth playing, even if you haven't been able to play the first three games in the series. Frostpunk 2. The original Frostpunk was a fresh take on the city builder genre, with a unique setting where you have to build and manage a city around sources of heat, since the planet has essentially frozen over. Its sequel pulls the camera back a bit, and instead of having you put down individual buildings, you're now laying out entire districts with a single click. Despite this more zoomed out take on the gameplay, however, Frostpunk 2 still makes the player choose between two horrifying choices for the survival of their city. Much like its predecessor, and the general progression of the title has been taken in an interesting direction, such as how trade routes are managed and how districts can boost or bring down one another, depending on proximity. All of this is paired with some wonderful visuals and excellent sound design that perfectly manage to bring your cities to life. A Plague Tale Requiem. A Plague Tale Requiem is a direct sequel to A Plague Tale Innocence and revolves around the two siblings once more having to travel together again. This time around, Amicia and Hugo de Rune have to travel south in order to try and look for a cure for Hugo's affliction. On the gameplay side of things, it offers more of a refinement over its predecessor rather than any radical changes. Players take on the role of Amicia while Hugo helps out from time to time. However, both characters also have plenty of new abilities to play around with in combat encounters. A Plague Tale Requiem also acts as an absolute feast for the eyes, considering its incredible level of visual fidelity and strong art direction. The Rogue Prince of Persia. After having spent several months in early access, The Rogue Prince of Persia was finally out a few weeks ago, and the fact that the developer Evil Empire took player feedback quite seriously is evident. The title features incredibly polished side-scrolling and platforming with smooth animations and a great visual style that still manages to work well with the randomly generated levels. Throw on top some fast-paced combat that rewards quick timing, as well as a large variety of weapons, and you're going to have a great time as you figure out the time-bending story of the prince who's trying to save his people after previously having been the unwitting instigator of this doom to begin with. Middle-earth: Shadow of War. Middle-earth: Shadow of War builds on everything its predecessor did in expansive ways. It brings back its expansive nemesis system, which allows protagonist Talion to face down various kinds of orc enemies, each with their own unique personalities and fighting styles. On top of this, the orcs winning the fight also means that they'll get stronger, making the subsequent rematch even harder. The nemesis system alone makes Shadow of War worth your time, but if that's not enough, it also has a fun story exploring an alternate timeline of the Lord of the Rings books, where a giant war was waged against the forces of Mordor well before the events of the books taking place. The gameplay also serves as an excellent evolution of the classical style of open-world action gameplay that we saw over the last couple of console generations. Shadow of the Tomb Raider. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Lara Croft embarks once again on a perilous hunt for a precious treasure. However, in her carelessness, Croft accidentally sets off a chain of events that threatens the world, and now she must find a way to stop the destruction. On the gameplay side of things, it offers fast and responsive gunplay, as well as plenty of options for some stealth, including the ability for Croft to cover herself in mud to blend in with her surroundings better. The star of the game is undoubtedly the platforming, and with plenty of tombs for Croft to raid, Shadow of the Tomb Raider offers just about everything that you could ask for. Black Myth: Wukong. Black Myth: Wukong is an interesting take on a classic setting. The game features excellent boss fights along with some gorgeous visuals. These aspects are further bolstered by the fact that the combat system is incredible and responsive. Even the encounter design deserves some praise, since Black Myth: Wukong has been designed around the idea of making the player use just about every tool they have at their disposal. There isn't really much else to say that hasn't already been said plenty of times already. It did, after all, manage to hold on to its concurrent player count records at launch when compared to any game out there on PC. Mafia: The Definitive Edition. While the Mafia series has seen a newfound level of success thanks to the recent release of Mafia: The Old Country, the original Mafia is still worth revisiting, especially in its Definitive Edition form. Since it now features modernized gameplay and combat systems, as well as a massive upgrade in visual quality, the story revolves around humble taxi driver Thomas Angelo in the city of Lost Haven, who finds himself embroiled with the local mob thanks to a recent car chase against a rival mob. Things slowly escalate as Angelo climbs up the ranks of the Salieri family. Interestingly, the story is told in the form of Angelo confessing to his crimes to a detective with liberal use of flashbacks as the main storytelling device. The title also features a fun open world to drive through, especially since few games ever use the Great Depression as their setting. Mad Max. Having come out at a time where many players and critics were suffering from open world fatigue, Mad Max was quite overlooked. However, in the years since, the title has been vindicated thanks to its excellent open world design and strong gameplay. Mad Max is a unique open world game where the player's vehicle, the magnum opus, is an important part of progression. Much of the game will be spent with you as Max trying to find parts and blueprints to upgrade the car. Along with this, there is also an emphasis on vehicular combat, as well as good old fisticuffs and some ranged weapons thrown in for good measure. Hogwarts Legacy. Hogwarts Legacy is an open-world game that perfectly manages to tap into the world of the Harry Potter books. The title takes place 100 years before the events of the books, and puts players in the shoes of a budding young wizard joining the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. As they live out their student life, players will also eventually discover a bubbling goblin uprising, as well as criminal wizards. Hogwarts Legacy is one of those games that any fan of the Harry Potter series owes themselves to play because of just how well it captures the magical feelings of the books. Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon. While Skyrim might offer a fun take on a fantasy open-world RPG, Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon takes a darker turn. The game takes on the classic Tales of Arthurian legend, albeit with its own unique interpretations. Along with its vast open world, Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon also features quite a bit of emphasis on first-person combat, be it with swords or at range with a bow and some arrows. There are also plenty of other things to do while you're out and about, from gathering crafting materials to simply taking a break by sketching some scenery or fishing by a lake. Star Wars Outlaws. Star Wars Outlaws stands as a redemption story of its own, overcoming early skepticism to win players over. While the game was a mess when it first came out, the developers have taken quite a bit of player feedback to then introduce a host of fixes to the game. From gameplay aspects like improving how stealth works, to the addition of plenty of story content through the release of 2 expansions, Star Wars Outlaws is a great way to experience the Star Wars universe without the baggage of having to play as a Jedi. Assassin's Creed Shadows. Assassin's Creed Shadows represents something of a new leaf for the franchise. While many had found the last 2 releases, Valhalla and Odyssey, a bit too bloated, Shadows pulls its filler and padding back a bit, instead focusing on delivering a few core activities that are actually fun and make the world a joy to explore. It also finally takes the franchise to Japan, and introduces a pair of new protagonists, the stealthy Naue and the fearsome Yasuke. The two have to work together to figure out the secrets behind Oda Nobunaga's death, while also dealing with the machinations of an early form of the Templars. The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion Remastered. While Skyrim might serve as a fantastic open-world RPG in its own right, its predecessor, Oblivion, was also a downright excellent game, and now with the remastered release, we can once more explore the lands of Cyrodiil as we take on the opening of the Oblivion Gates and a Daedric invasion. Along with this, there are also plenty of side quests to take on, including a host of factions to join, from the Fighters Guild to the Dark Brotherhood. You can even simply become an arena fighter if that's all you really want to do. It's ultimately all up to you. Atomfall. While Rebellion might be known for its excellent shooter series Sniper Elite, the studio decided to try something different with Atomfall. Rather than taking on Nazi soldiers or covert missions during World War II, Atomfall instead has you scavenging for resources in a strange world where it's up to you to figure out the game's story through your own skills of investigation and deduction. While there are plenty of fights you can still get into, you'll want to be a lot more careful about the kinds of enemies that you decide to take on, since you're a lot more fragile and not as well armed as you might be in a Sniper Elite game. Sniper Elite Resistance. While Rebellion has been experimenting with Atomfall, it still hasn't left its Sniper Elite series behind. We also recently got the release of Sniper Elite Resistance, where players take on the role of a brand new protagonist, SOE agent Harry Hawker, who's taking on missions that run parallel to the events of Sniper Elite 5. Since it's ultimately a spin-off, Sniper Elite Resistance features primarily the same gameplay as its predecessors, but with quite a bit more refinements in various things, from second-to-second gameplay all the way up to how its missions are structured. Firewatch. Firewatch is a narrative adventure game where the goal is quite simple. On his first day at Firewatch Tower, 2 Forks, protagonist Henry gets some interesting calls on his radio, which is otherwise only used to contact his supervisor who's based at the Thoroughfare Tower. Things quickly start getting dark, and Henry must figure out who's calling him on the radio, and what exactly is up with the supervisor who he's yet to physically meet. Firewatch doesn't really feature any combat, rather there's a focus on exploration and environmental storytelling, and it's largely up to the player to figure out where to go and how to get there. Dying Light. While there have been a couple of sequels out so far, the original Dying Light is still a game well worth playing, thanks to its fantastic melee combat systems and parkour mechanics that make traveling through the streets and rooftops of the zombie-infected city of Haran so fun. The story itself is also quite interesting, with protagonist Kyle Crane having been infected with the zombie virus and needing to find a way to curtail symptoms before he ultimately turns. The title also features an interesting twist on the day-night cycle, with daytime being safe for exploration, but nighttime offering far greater rewards at the risk of the player having to deal with incredibly dangerous and more powerful zombies dubbed volatiles. All of this, combined with a fun crafting system that rewards creativity in your weapons of choice, makes Dying Light often feel like it's still the best game in the series so far. Ace Combat 7: Skies Unknown. Until the release of Ace Combat 7: Skies Unknown, the Ace Combat franchise felt like one of the worst kept secrets in terms of how insane it can be in both terms of quality of gameplay and story. Ace Combat 7: Skies Unknown tells a brand new story in the world of Strangeril, with the plot primarily revolving around a massive war between the Kingdom of Euresia and the Ocean Foundation. The title features excellent arcade-style dogfighting combat with a host of fighter jets from the real world, as well as quite a few new fictional jets for some added fun. Half-Life 2. Quite an easy contender for one of the greatest games ever made, Half-Life 2 has a sprawling campaign that holds up to even this day, thanks to the sheer amount of variety it presents to players, both in the form of different weapons and enemies, as well as the mechanics of various levels. The title was also important in introducing the physics engine that's part of Valve's own Source engine, and the feature was on incredible display thanks to a weapon like the gravity gun. Throw on top an impressive story that's told in an incredibly minimalistic way without ever cutting to cutscenes, and it's easy to see why Half-Life 2 is so widely regarded as being such a great game, even in 2025. Halo: The Master Chief Collection. While PC as a platform is no stranger to first-person shooters, it's hard to argue that the Halo franchise isn't one of the best that the game genre has seen. Thankfully, thanks to Halo: The Master Chief Collection, players can experience the entirety of the Halo storyline, starting from the original Halo Combat Evolved, its sequel Halo 2, Halo 3, and its spin-off ODST, Halo Reach, and even the start of 343 Industries, now Halo Studios, run with the franchise Halo 4. The collection also offers a way to play all of the various games levels in remixed orders, following distinct themes like levels that focus on vehicles, for example, to focusing more on certain subplots. Halo: The Master Chief Collection is essentially the best way to experience a seminal shooter series, warts and all. Monster Hunter Wilds. Quite possibly the most refined gameplay offered so far in the Monster Hunter franchise, Monster Hunter Wilds represents the pinnacle of the series. If not in its smaller roster of monsters when compared to its predecessors, then at least in its gameplay systems and massive, beautiful worlds. Monster Hunter Wilds features a short, fun story that takes you across the Forbidden Lands as you try to get young child Nata back to his family. Along the way, you'll get to take on several monsters, both new to the series as well as returning favorites, using the weapons of your choice out of 14 distinct options. Monster Hunter Wilds features plenty of gameplay refinements as well, including a mount system, as well as the ability to carry around 2 weapons that you can switch between mid-fight, which is great since each weapon feels like you're playing a new game altogether. Returnal. One of the rare instances of a AAA roguelite game, Returnal is an intense third-person shooter that puts players in the shoes of space pilot Celine Vassos, who finds herself having crashed on an alien planet named Atropos. What follows is a psychedelic adventure as she tries to find the source of a mysterious signal called the White Shadow. But the twist is that Celine seems to be stuck in some kind of time loop, where every time she dies, she finds herself waking up the moment her ship's crashed. The title is filled with fast-paced and tense combat that has you dodging massive projectiles shot by strange creatures, and occasionally also getting your hands on upgrades for your weapons. The story itself is also quite interesting, pulling in plenty of allusions from myths as she tries to make it off Atropos alive. Sleeping Dogs. Born from the ashes of the long-dead true crime series of games, Sleeping Dogs is the closest we've ever gotten to having a Hong Kong action movie in video game form. The plot revolves around the adventures of undercover cop Wei Shen, who must infiltrate a triad gang in order to take down it from the inside. When it comes to gameplay, Sleeping Dogs is an open-world game with several intermingling systems, from driving and vehicular combat to melee combat with slick martial arts moves, and the occasional bouts of ranged combat when you can get your hands on a gun. The game wonderfully realizes its setting of Hong Kong, often showing the stark contrast between the cleaner commercial areas of the city and the bright and colorful entertainment districts. Metro Exodus. Whereas the first 2 games in the Metro series were more focused on offering linear experiences, Metro Exodus broadened its scope by a considerable amount by opting to set players free in a more open environment. While far from an open-world game, Metro Exodus still provides quite a bit of freedom to players in terms of how they want to approach any situation. Along with this, the title also encourages plenty of exploration, since in keeping with the series' tradition, resources are scarce in Metro Exodus. Exploring it is also a great way to get your hands on valuable upgrade materials to improve the arsenal of weapons that you'll ultimately end up using against not only human enemies, but mutated foes as well. The story is also quite interesting since it revolves around Artyom, his wife Anna, and their friends, the Rangers, departing the Moscow metro system in a train to explore the Russian wilderness. Gears of War Reloaded. When the original Gears of War first came out back in 2006, it was considered a mind-blowing experience for the time thanks to its visuals, as well as its refinement over the turn-based shooter mechanics that we'd seen done much worse in plenty of other games. Gears of War Reloaded, however, proves that the original title still holds up to this day thanks to its incredible campaign with plenty of set pieces, fun and varied weapons to play around with, and some downright fantastic visual upgrades that have been made to take better advantage of modern hardware. Dead Cells. Dead Cells is one of those rare indie games that manages to get just about every single one of its aspects right. Even something as simple as movement and exploration feels great in the roguelite action game. And the level of variety on offer with the weapons, as well as the meta progression systems that encourages not only the mastery of the traversal systems, but also a willingness to explore, make just about every run of Dead Cells feel like a fun time. Throw on top some excellent pixel art that really makes its massive boss fights come to life, as well as the plethora of additional content ends up making it very difficult to put the side-scroller down for good. Detroit Become Human. While games made by Quantic Dream might be quite divisive at times, Detroit Become Human is outright the best title that the studio has put out so far. Featuring narrative-focused gameplay that largely involves having conversations and making choices at key moments, Detroit Become Human tells 3 distinct stories in a world where humanity treats sentient androids that it has developed as slaves. All 3 stories have the player take on the role of a distinct android, where you have to figure out the complex moral quandaries that take place throughout the storylines. Portal 2. When the first Portal came out, it was widely regarded as a radical new entry in the genre that was otherwise known to revolve around killing things. It ultimately ended up laying the foundations for what would become Portal 2, a bigger, grander sequel in every way possible. Portal 2 takes place an unknown amount of time after the events of the first game, and has Chell once more pick up the portal guns to find her way out of the Aperture Science facility that she's been trapped in. Along with GLaDOS returning once more as a major character, Portal 2 also features a new character in the form of Wheatley. We also get a lot of storytelling in the game, since quite a bit of it has you exploring ancient versions of the bathroom curtain company that would eventually become Aperture Science. Outlast. There might be plenty of stealth-based horror games out there, but Outlast manages to be something quite special thanks to its use of some real-world history to build up its scare. Revolving primarily around the MKUltra experiments that were conducted by the CIA, the game puts you into the shoes of independent journalist Miles Upshur, who's trying to get the scoop on Mount Massive Asylum for the criminally insane. Unfortunately, owing to unethical experiments, most of its residents have essentially gone insane, and now Upshur must figure out how to survive and get out in one piece, while also making sure he gets enough evidence along the way. Outlast also makes use of a handheld camera as its primary POV device, since it offers a night vision mode. However, players will also have to keep track of their battery consumption, since you don't want to be trapped in the dark with murderous people around you. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Ostensibly the closest the Metal Gear franchise gets to having a final game since it takes place further into the future, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is a major departure for the series. It trades in the tactical espionage action in favor of the more bombastic tagline of lightning bolt action, and puts you in the shoes of a fully cyborgerized Raiden at the peak of his power. Developed by Platinum Games, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance features a fantastic combat system that has an emphasis on not only long and vicious combos, but also parrying the enemy's attacks to open them up for massive counterattacks. This, alongside with the Zandatsu system that lets you just cut about everything, be it an enemy's limbs or a bridge's support, makes Revengeance a treat to play. Add to that an over-the-top but fun story about private military contractors and a cartoonishly evil senator, and you have an explosive roller coaster. Resident Evil. Before the remake of Resident Evil 2 back in 2019 was considered the high watermark for video game remakes, the series had originally earned similar acclaim for its remake of the original Resident Evil. Originally released on the GameCube all the way back in 2002, the remake of the original Resident Evil eventually made its way to PC, complete with higher resolution textures and all of the high-quality upgrades that it got over the original. Even after all these years, Resident Evil still manages to feel like a one-of-a-kind survival horror experience, thanks to its tight level design and generally excellent gameplay that melds environmental puzzle solving and tense action sequences, all while keeping you on the edge of your seat thanks to a constant scarcity of weapons and ammo. Watch Dogs 2. It's no secret that the original Watch Dogs was a bit of a disappointment, both in terms of its visuals as well as its story and characters. The series' second stab at the series in the form of Watch Dogs 2, however, proved to be a much more interesting experience. Rather than focusing on the brooding Aiden Pierce, Watch Dogs 2 instead stars a group of scrappy young adults as they venture into the real world to start their careers, but find themselves fighting against an authoritarian regime that's also making use of high-tech surveillance technology to control the populace. Protagonist Marcus Holloway is a much more fun character than Pierce ever was, and the attempts of his rebel hacker crew, DedSec, to take down CTOS 2.0 are a wild, fun, and often emotional adventure. Silent Hill F. After the Silent Hill franchise spent over a decade being missing from the overall gaming scene, the series made a bombastic return with last year's remake of the seminal Silent Hill 2. A year later, and now we even have a brand new entry in the Stories franchise, Silent Hill F. The game takes place in the unique setting of a quaint Japanese fishing town in the 1960s, where school-going girl Hanako has a strained relationship with her parents and goes to meet her friends for some solace. However, a sinister fog starts covering the town of Ebisugaoka, and Hanako finds herself trapped and fighting for her life. While there is an emphasis on combat this time around, Silent Hill F is still able to effectively pull off the scares and tense atmospheres that the series is known for. Dying Light: The Beast. The newest entry in the Dying Light franchise is seen as something of a return to form for the series. While Dying Light 2 Stay Human did well for the developer Techland, the studio itself acknowledged that it had lost what made the original Dying Light great, and hence we get The Beast. Once more putting us into the shoes of Kyle Crane after the events of the following, Dying Light: The Beast features improved parkour-based traversal over its predecessor, while also bringing in improvements to both melee and ranged combat, all of which is packaged into a fantastic new open world to explore with plenty of variety, both in terms of zombie types and the scenery. Trails in the Sky First Chapter. A reimagining of an absolute classic, Trails in the Sky First Chapter is a ground-up 3D remake of a seminal 2D sprite-based RPG. As its name implies, it's the first part of the expansive Trails franchise, and puts you in the shoes of Estelle Bright and her adopted brother Joshua as they set off as members of the Peacekeeping Guild, starting out as bracers and slowly working their way up. The Trails series, while long, absolutely features several stories well worth experiencing, and there's currently no better way to start your journey than with Trails in the Sky First Chapter. Blue Prince. Puzzle games, especially in the indie space, tend to come up in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Very rarely, however, does one show up that ends up feeling like a revelation. This is precisely what developer Dog Bomb achieved with Blue Prince. The premise is quite simple. You're stuck in a mysterious manor, Mount Holly, where the rooms shift around for no apparent reason. The core of the game is exploring the mansion, but the twist is that the player decides what the next room will be every time they open a door. Blue Prince has a wide gamut of puzzles for players to figure out as they try to make their way to the rumored Room 46. To throw another wrench in your plans, the house once again shifts its rooms around every dawn. Blue Prince is the kind of game where you can spend anywhere from between 15 minutes to several hours at a stretch as you try to climb through the mysterious rooms of Mount Holly to find the way to their destination. Commandos Origins. While the real-time tactical stealth series Commandos doesn't really need much of an introduction, the latest release, Commandos Origins, proves that the genre and style of gameplay still has legs in the modern day. Taking us all the way back to the origin of the World War II crew of Commandos, you play in the original Commandos. Commandos Origins offers entirely new challenges throughout its various maps, all with more modernized gameplay thanks to updated visuals, as well as a large variety of objective types that will have you make use of just about every ability that you and your crew can muster. Hey, did you know that we at Gaming Vault upload new videos every day? Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell. And let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.